6:01, Tuesday, July 9th. Thank you, everyone, for being here. First, approval of the minutes.
Oh,
Are they not in here?
I mean, I may have not printed and
Yeah, they're on the back.
enough copies, if you can share, I thought I had enough.
You have an extra right there? Here's.
You got it on the screen?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, I thought I printed more.
I'm gonna take marks.
Yep.
He doesn't seem to be ready.
I'll go to change.
All right.
I was here.
No, you weren't because
Yeah,
you weren't because remember,
so we're worried about you.
yeah.
Now we know why. Okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, Nancy made the motion, Joe seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Public comment. We have anybody, public comment? I see someone in the Zoom land. Ken, did you want a public comment?
Yes, I'm just here to listen, to hear what people have to say about the plan. I think the concern of everybody is that Main Street be protected and the area around it supported and not overwhelm or strangle it. And also the main issue is that Main Street should be connected to the Acoustic Trail as part of the Gateway area. I think that would be extremely important, both for Main Street and the trail. And those are, in general, my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. All right, approval of the agenda. This is the time to move stuff if you want.
We accept the agenda.
Second. All right, that was John Ryan made the motion, Patsy seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Team and staff reports, I don't think we have any today. We'll get to old business in just a second, but I do want to welcome our new board members. Patsy Dupree has been on the board previously and she got appointed again. It was a fluke she got off that, but we fixed that now. So yes, welcome back. Patsy's also been on community character throughout the last year, so she is well versed in this already. And then also Oliver Wall, the manager of Mass General. Welcome, Oliver. Thanks for being here. We can do more introductions. We have some folks in the room, probably Matt Manley, Lou Holloway. Jeff Miller is our council liaison at least until December. And he was, I guess they appointed him when we had a council member resign, so Jeff is now our temporary liaison, so it'll be nice to have him in the room. And a council member for a long time, then retired from it and then.
Get your name tag here.
And I'm on the phone with Con, so I get a pass.
Okay,
No big deal. Oh, that's good.
old business. Downtown master plan, final discussion. So Matt Manley is going to lead the way on this. What are our overall overarching goals for today, Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. I'm gonna kick it over to Lou to get us started here.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, I think Matt's gonna talk a little bit about some themes, and things that we think we've heard, and want to focus on, but what I want to say is, that we are, as a component of the comprehensive plan, there are multiple elements of that comprehensive plan. Some are more immediately applicable and used by city council in decision-making than others, i.e. have a more immediate legal purpose than others. And so as you look through the plan, chapters 4, 5, and 6 are future land use, downtown master plan, and implementation plan. And chapter 4 is our character areas, our future land use element, and that will be a component of the plan that city council will use and staff will use to develop comprehensive plan consistency statements as soon as the plan is adopted. So it impacts rezonings and conditional zoning districts right out of the gate. The downtown master plan is a variety of recommendations, including things like recommended heights, design standards for streets, for buildings, for public spaces, so on and so forth. Those design standards will have to be built into a zoning ordinance moving forward. Their adoption as a component of the comprehensive plan does not make them immediately applicable. So staff won't turn around and say, developer, you want to do something on Main Street, we have these design standards in our comprehensive plan. We won't be able to enforce those immediately. So we'll have to take those and move them forward. So I think it's important that the overall idea of design guidelines and those pieces of the downtown master plan are recognized as visionary and sort of the first step in the process of making those things that would be a part of future requirements for the district. Why is that important for you all? Because not only are you looking at those recommendations in the comprehensive plan, but you would have multiple additional swings at the details of anything that the planning department would move forward as we go forward. So before something would become law, before a developer was required to do it, before it impacted building height specifically in the downtown area, those things would have to come back to you. And then the implementation plan, chapter 6, is really where we're trying to prioritize which of these, 20 years worth of projects we're going to take on or start with first. So each of those chapters has a very important role to play, but want to kind of color how they'll be used and how they'll influence our work at the gate. So as you're thinking about those design standards and whatnot, I would encourage us as much as we can to stay kind of at a high level of what we want to see with those, because there will be additional opportunities to get into the weeds. And I'll stop with that. Matt, did that cover?
Yeah, essentially, you don't have to be married to every detail that's in the downtown master plan, but it does, because it is so detailed, sets us up to be able to move it into required status or a legally required standards pretty quickly, because we've got this component already built in. But yeah, as Lou said, you'll have other swings at it before it becomes legally required, but it will serve as a guide. And if we do have some type of larger scale project that tries to locate within the downtown area, we will be using these standards as a guide to impress upon the developer the vision that we want to see achieved. And if and when they are adopted as our code, then they would be required at that point. So what I think would be best is to revisit the points that we went through a presentation last time we met. Am I going the right direction? Up. And we keyed on, this feels like it. Yeah.
It's
it is.
in the,
Item
they're in
4.
the agenda items that you have.
We keyed in on some,
Yeah.
some main topics that were kind of discussion points for this group. So we want to revisit those, kind of, make sure we have a consensus on, yes. So the goal really is to, tomorrow night, there is a public hearing in front of city council for, the comprehensive plan. They will not be voting to adopt it tomorrow night, but they'll be hearing from the public. We will be presenting the planning board's recommendations, which I think were highlighted in your packet. We met with them on the 24th of June. And then I will also be presenting to them the recommendations from this group. And so those are two kind of official actions from these supportive boards that we want to present to city council and say, these are what your appointed boards had to say about this plan. Yours is going to be very focused on chapter 5. Planning board was more broad across the whole document. But that's the goal. We want to get a recommendation from this body that I can turn around and present to city council. So you're serving that purpose of providing guidance to city council. So will that look like we like it how it is, recommend approval of the comp plan with chapter 5 as it's been presented? Or will it be, we move approval of chapter 5 as it's been presented with the following recommendations? And then some changes or revisions that you'd like to see in the final document that goes before council in August. And so some of the topics, planning board, highlighted some things that overlapped with some of the things we heard last time related to, readability of the maps and illustrations, making sure that you're oriented when you're looking at some of the illustrations in particular. And then, some of the photo examples, making sure that there's relevance to Hendersonville. That is something, those are things we can talk about additionally, though it sounds like those things are being carried forward as recommendations, since the planning board touched on those as well. So moving on to the primary considerations, we felt like building height, some of the discussion and clarity that was needed around that discussion would probably be a primary point of discussion for this afternoon. And then if there are any other points that folks want to bring up, pull up the plan, we can look at those, make sure everybody's comfortable, and then hopefully we can work towards consensus and get a formal recommendation made. So with that, we can go ahead and jump to, give me just a minute to find our spot here. This is the version of the plan that all the feedback is being funneled into. And so all the final revisions will be based on the comments in this document. And so if you've done a review and you've made some notes, we can check to see if some of those notes have already been echoed by other folks. But let's dive into the building height conversation, because we know that was a point where we wanted to have some clarity. And I've got a specific. Yeah, right here. Yeah. So there's some confusion around, well, if it's facing Main Street, is it different? There's a note in there about that. And then there were some other conversations about a 64. Is that enough? Do we want it taller than that? So I think those are kind of the main things that we want to settle in on. In terms of fronting Main Street, I don't have a diagram, so you have to kind of bear with me, but what I am, as a starting point for discussion, what I am proposing is that, and what is attempted to be reflected in here that needs clarity, is that for the historic district on Main Street, so a building or lot that fronts Main Street within the historic district, that the front half of that lot or building between Main Street and Edwards or Main Street and Wall Street, that Main Street fronting half be no higher than the 40 feet.
And Edwards is and Wall Street are the alleys. So alley towards Main, three stories, 40 feet.
And that's only in the historic district. So there's the map that's in the agenda packet that shows where that historic district is.
Main Street fronting in the historic district, 40
That's
feet.
for historic buildings in the horse district.
No, not necessarily. So if someone were to, I don't know, tear down a building, or there became a empty lot, or something that affected someone's building new, I think what I'm proposing is that they would stay within that 40 feet because that's the current character, kind of max height, except for a couple of, outliers on the north end. That's, it's usually, it's 1 story and 2 story, a couple, 3 stories here and there. And then you've got the other outliers, the 5-story buildings, that you can see over that way. And again, just the front half. So they have a component here where they talk about a step back, so that the building would get taller or even step down, if you're up against residential and you want to kind of lower the intensity of the building as you transition towards residential. You could either step back or step down. They've got that concept in here, and that's essentially what I'm proposing is that that's what the height limits would reflect is that ability to as you move back, you could step up. So if you're on Main Street, and you're having that pedestrian experience, it's maintaining that 40-foot limit on any new construction. But as you move away from Main Street, there would be opportunities to go up. Maybe you're adding additional stories for residential units, more rooftops downtown. But we don't want those rooftops to come at the expense of the character that's experienced on Main Street. And then other than that, the 64 feet would be permitted within the area in pink. And then it would drop to 40, going out 7th Avenue and the surrounding 64. And then in that lower trailhead, where Spartanburg and Greenville Highway come together and along Houston Trail, 40 feet.
So outside of the alleys, that can start going to become 64. So from like Wall to like, say, Church, anything on that side can go 64.
Correct. And on the other sides of Church and King.
Can I wasn't here at the last meeting, but what was why do we want to go taller to 60?
Well, so this, or, okay, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, the conversation on what he was talking about, the 40 feet, we were confused about it partially the last time. But I didn't hear your full question before. I was thinking
Well,
it wasn't. So since I
thought
that
that,
I'd let that.
Yeah, I mean.
I think there's two
Yeah.
discussions,
Yeah.
right? One is what I just described was what was attempted to be in this draft. It was not well represented. There was confusion. So what I just described is the clarity.
The historic district, they should say be no more than 3 stories.
That's right. And then as you move out of the historic district, say on the south side of Main Street, where it's not the historic district, then you would not, it would be 64 feet. That also lowers an elevation some. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, or I heard you say 40 feet back from Main Street. What's the distance from, I guess, the building lines on Main Street to Edwards or? And
What would that setback
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know offhand exactly what the depths of those lots are. I would be guessing at maybe 100 feet.
So that was
Traditional.
100 feet.
Yeah, it's 100 feet. There you go.
And so is there for that, cause if they have a step back. So a part of the backside of the building could be taller,
That's correct.
is there,
Between the half point of the lot and the alley could go up to 60.
How high could it go to?
64. And so the other part of that is if there is consensus on what I just described, we would want that revised and made clearer in the map, in notes for that, so that that's made very clear.
No, I was just trying to, I read all that. I was just trying to figure out why the question is, maybe I misunderstood it, that we should look at suggesting a taller than current state legislation.
Let's see if we have consensus around the Main Street having. So that,
Different things that we were talking about.
yeah. So let's tackle one and then let's tackle that one, if you don't.
Okay, all right.
So the way this map looks is that all of Main Street could go up to 64. Because it's in the pink, right? So what I'm saying is there would be an exception to that rule. Front facing halves in the historic district fronting Main Street. So if we can if there's a consensus with that, then we can move on to maybe another discussion around building height.
I guess one more question then. If it's 40 main facing. And then the back half of that block can go up, it go up to 64 feet.
That's a big,
That is what we're saying. Yes. That's correct.
We were talking, when it came up, we were talking about mixed use of downtown and the residential, and people like the apartments above the stores, but this rule would open it up to, if I want to build a 6-story apartment complex right up to the sidewalk on Wall Street or Church Street, I could do that, right?
As long as it's not.
As long as it's not front facing Main Street, I could just box in all of Main Street with apartment buildings.
As long as our uses,
Back half of the thing.
and unless we restricted, gotta find it here, restricted the use that that ground floors have a commercial component, yeah.
Is that
language in the document? That is what
You have that for Main Street, don't you? They can't be commercial, residential on first.
currently do not.
We have proposed, yeah. So, and the example that I had in the agenda packet too, when I was trying to wrap my head around what this could mean as far as the height, 40 feet and 64 feet is like a not historic building that's within the historic district is where PNC Bank is over on by Caroline. And so that building, if it were to come down, just think of that being an empty lot. And if something were to be rebuilt there, it would be only 3 stories, 40 feet in that lot based off of this.
How, go ahead.
Back half of it could be 3 stories and then 4 or 5 stories, whatever, 5 stories, yeah.
If that's a historic district right there where that's at.
Yeah.
Which it is.
Yeah.
The new apartment on Wall Street and Third, how tall is that?
2 floors, I think.
Oh, I have more than that. It's 3.
it's 3.
Yeah, I think that's on
3.
So it's probably that height.
It looks really nice. Real narrow lot.
Talks about the mix of use. I did hear one question about the building edge. This does propose a build to line. So that would be where the building would be required to be built up to that point versus a setback, which is what we currently use, where you can't build until you get setback a certain distance from the property line. But this is recommending a build to line. And that's being presented here. So kind of as Lou kicked off with, in terms of details on whether it would be required to have commercial on the first floor, that would be a detail that we would build into the requirements as we were adopting them, making them formal. I think we would consider that within Church King, you know, in the South Main and the North Main, within that block, those blocks. And then I think it, maybe on both sides of Church and King, fronting, that would be required. This is our primary commercial central business district. We've got to have that opportunity for commercial uses preserved.
Don't we already have a new construction that's a residential on Third between Main and?
Yeah, because it
That's
currently allows for it, but we've discussed that in this body about having that as something that needs to be changed. It's just not been changed, it's proposed in the plan. Of taking off the first floor residential for Freddie Main Street.
So Matt, everything you're outlining right now would be proposed as part of like the more immediate changes with this new plan.
Yes, it would be a revision that's made as part of the final approved document.
And that would have nothing to do with going back to the state. This is all local. We wouldn't be able to do this.
Yeah.
Well, this
the
doesn't
over
change
60
law.
He's asked about the over 64 feet, so yeah, that's a separate one that will.
Right. Right, but what you're proposing would be just the city
Yeah, and because the
making it,
comprehensive plan.
making it zoning, basically.
So what I'm proposing would be a revision in this guiding document. That is gonna be formally adopted by city council. In terms of local bill for height restrictions and going above 64 feet. That also, if that was a desire of the board, could be in this document because it is a guiding document, doesn't become law. If we say, if we have a recommendation in here that it should be above 64 feet in certain areas, yeah, that would have to be revisited through legislation to change that. You could express that desire or that vision in this document, but it wouldn't change anything unless legal, the legislative action is taken. Does that make sense? This is really a guide and a visionary document.
And so your idea was having the back half of a front facing building to be able to go higher? What was the motivation for that? Just to open it up to more development?
Well, so
Yeah, go ahead,
let me
go
give
ahead.
you a little framework there. So right now, today, on Main, downtown and around downtown, you can go up to 64 feet. That's what the current code allows. So the vision in the downtown design guidelines find existing. So it's sort of saying, moving forward, our direction and our vision for the district downtown is to be a little bit more intentional about what's happening in terms of height along Main Street, while basically leaving the other parts of the district alone. We're okay with the 64 feet elsewhere. But today, if a building burned down on Main Street, they would be permitted, at least by the code, to go to 64 feet. So this is what we're talking about is, do we want to recommend that Main Street get a little bit more fine treatment? And we look at that a little bit more closely and look at stepping that height to match a lot of the existing buildings.
I look at this from an aesthetics standpoint. If you're downtown, walking the street, what is acceptable, what's not? To me personally, 40 feet on Main is fine. That keeps it within the historical, criteria. That back half, that's 100 foot deep to the alley. So that's 50 and 50. If they break up the building and do a +1, which would be, to me, my limitation. You don't get to go more than one additional floor. Because from the street or from the distance on the street, you're gonna see that as a backdrop, to that facade that you've created on Main Street, for historical purposes. And then that back half, okay, now you got design standards and criteria. It has to look like the front facing facade, or it goes modern and blows the whole scene.
And it would still be a historic district, so it'd still have to fit, right?
We have to go through a COA process, yes.
That might help on that.
Right. I still think a +1 is a limitation. If on the other side of the alley, you're going to 64, right? So then you gotta climb that to, have that architecture in your face.
I imagine there's lots of examples of that though around the country.
Is 64 4 or 5?
5.
Okay, it says 4 in chart in here.
Does say.
And I did the math and I was like, what is it?
That's a big fourth
Yeah.
floor.
Okay.
They did look like some of that may be getting driven by commercial first floors, which can be in a new building, they can be 18 feet. So they can eat up a lot of height right out of that. But I don't think it's not, wouldn't be atypical if it weren't mixed use, if it were all residential or something that, 5 floors could be 64 feet.
So, go ahead. You done? You're saying 40 and then at the halfway mark, the 50 foot line plus 1 story. And then at the alley, full 64. into the district.
Right, like there, you have a picture, that's essentially plus, looks like a big +1. But, you know, that, I think that doesn't deter from the front property, from the character there. But if you were to go another one or two, then you do definitely aesthetically, I agree with you. I think aesthetically, that would be, that could be, could change the character.
It's also worth noting, though, that Main Street is the high ground and it slopes down away from it. And so that second, even though it's 64, may not look like a
Depending on
full
where you-
step. Right.
Hear a lot of what Phil said, though, it's like 64 is already pretty tall. I think if there's like a skyscraper anywhere near downtown, it's gonna change the whole landscape. It's gonna interrupt the shop of the scenery.
How tall is the main building?
Yeah, in perspective.
64, right? Yeah. But like, I don't see much appetite for going bigger. I don't think we should. I've never heard anybody saying we want bigger, taller buildings downtown.
But do you think it should be less than that? Because you're
I think
saying.
we'll extend the Main Street.
But we first need to get a consensus on the first part,
It'd be helpful, I think so.
which is this. So
There's kind of a new proposal on the table.
how do you feel about that idea?
I think it's a great idea.
When
How does everybody else feel about it?
specifically just one story higher
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
instead of two.
one, and then,
Or
and then the rest is,
So a step up 1 floor to the alley. And then 64 feet out on the outside edge.
so it would be like that, and then behind that would be another story, but at that point, you'd only see half of it because
Right.
almost everywhere, but maybe 4, it goes down off of Main. And some of it's pretty drastic, like Third is like goes way low.
Current conditions, you mean, or on the map of the proposed height?
No, I'm talking about current conditions of like this, how this
Elevation.
elevation goes. Because, so one of the things that we talked about, and Matt, and just to let you guys know, Matt and I talked for an hour and a half on Monday about all the things, so I feel real good about a lot of stuff now. I love this idea though, and the building height was still one we knew we were gonna have to like come in here and have a big discussion about. But, elevation or consideration of elevation, like on the south end of Main Street can handle a lot taller of a building than the north end. So like the bank being higher up in elevation, this bank right here is way higher looking than that same building would be, even though I don't know if you want that ugly building down at the south end, hopefully that won't happen. But it wouldn't look near as intrusive, I don't think, at the south end. So elevation consideration was like a huge thing. Anyway, continue.
I think, somebody can clarify this for me. The 64 feet, right, and I don't know that that has to be a hard number. Personally, I think that when you realize that the bottom floor is, yes, it's always bigger. And does that mean you've got to shrink it to 4 floors, you know, to stay within the 64? Or can the city have some, you know, a little tolerance in there to work with special situations? But more importantly, you know, we've got a contoured, you know, city. So the 64 is taken from what point on the lot? Is it the bottom of the lot, the midpoint, the average height or elevation of the lot, or is it taken from the top?
So, go ahead.
That will change.
Grading TA.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
So we do an average grade and it's done by taking spot elevations. I won't repeat the exact language that we send to the architects and developers, but basically they have to pull spot elevations from the 4 corners of the building and spot elevations from along the facades. They can't be on berms or ground, you know, planters or anything like that. It has to be the natural grade. And then they get an average number from all those spot elevations. So if they're 10 feet on the top side and 0 on the other, their average elevation is 5, and they get to measure the 64 from the 5. So it will mean that, you know, one side of the building may actually be a little taller than 64 feet, and the other side of the building will be a little shorter than 64 feet. But that's how we determine what the elevation of the building is. We're reviewing the plans.
And it's to the parapet for a flat roof.
On the recommendation, Matt, if everybody agrees on whatever they agree on and you take this to the city council. And this is the beginning of the next step for coming up with the zoning rules and regulations and stuff like that. So whatever's decided here, recommendation to you to give to the city council, it still doesn't make any of this a law or a rule or anything like that. It's just a suggestion. And getting back to the suggestions that we were making on Main Street and other properties and things like that, with the Main Street part staying at, when you walk down the street and you look up and you see the buildings that are there, and then back stepping them up. I know part of the conversation that, I was having is allowing them to go over the 64 feet to pick some other number. And I understand where the 64 feet came in and when and years ago and all that kind of stuff, but the fact is there is no more land than what we already have. And economics is gonna drive how tall somebody's gonna put a building. Somebody right now, in theory, could buy the Mass General Store and put 3 more stories on top of it as it stands right now. And to preserve what you're talking about on Main Street, what we're talking about now would preserve that. But if they bought that building and they stepped back half the distance of the lot, they could go up to 64 feet if it made financial sense. But if you're paying the price for the property that things are going for now, it may have to make financial sense to go up to 70 feet to get another floor to be able to get enough units. And the point is trying to keep development going and keep everything going on a lot of these even vacant lots and vacant buildings and things. If you can't do certain things with them and make it make financial sense, they're gonna sit there and be dead buildings. And I think that was the thing for us getting all of this started, is wanting to see people in buildings and businesses and that kind of stuff. And from my experience, sometimes you have to get more units or more feet or whatever. And sometimes it gets to the point of when you're regulated at 64, no ifs, ands, or buts, 70 would make something work, but you can't get that other 6 feet. And because you have to go to the state and get it all approved, it's a process. So that was the reasoning. And there is a lot of property outside of the historic district that is now down to 40 foot. Where is, if you're taking advantage of what land is left, you could go up and make it work. So
The 64 feet is within a area.
It's on that.
That's the hash. This is the current.
State rating, 64.
Yeah, what the local bill says, you cannot go any higher than 64 in those areas. Inside that hatched area, you can't go higher than 64 per state law. Outside of that, it's our zoning that dictates the height. We do have some other zoning districts that allow 64, others that don't. So we don't have that limitation outside of that area. It's up to us, as far as our city council, to make those determinations within the zoning.
So I think, we're, again, going back to the Main Street, fronting properties. It's a relatively small area. It's the focus. It is really, it's really establishing a lot of the character of the Main Street experience I think I totally agree with Phil. I think, if there was a consensus that we make an adjustment to that and say, I would imagine you'd still want an overall height requirement, even to say +1. Because +1 could be,
You gotta put a number to it.
could be 18-foot ceilings. That like in that photograph, that was like a loft type of +1. So if anybody's gonna do multiple levels on Main Street fronting properties on the backside, it's gonna be residential units. That's what it's gonna be. If they did a loft, that would be like a luxury type of, unit or maybe a different type of business, but I think from Phil's initial point was just from an aesthetic standpoint. Yeah, I think if we had a limit on how many stories you could go up with, obviously you'd still need a height. I think you still want to put in a height
Right, so
limit on there.
52 feet.
Say, listen, like, from a design standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, we think a +1 would not deter from the character of the front facing properties that are capped at 40. But if you did more than +1, we think it would deter. So.
We talked about doing stories versus feet or feet or stories with consideration of feet also. So instead of it just being like one or the other, because if somebody wanted to do a building that was 4 stories with high ceiling, 12-foot ceilings in every single story for nice residential, me loving high ceilings, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's gonna kick over the 40, wait. 64, yes. So how can we figure that out?
One,
Or is that even a thing?
at the 40 level, so up front, yeah, your ground floor of a new building, 20 feet. Probably.
Yeah, big,
Right.
nice, high,
So that's gonna make it a 2-story
2-story building.
building.
Right.
With, 2, 18-foot ceilings or.
So that's what you're talking about, is like for the extra 6 feet, because even if you're not gonna go up another story, but you want the 6 feet so you can have bigger stories,
Right,
that's
and the thing is, I think
such a higher price.
the feet determination would be better than the story determination. Because you're looking at it from an outside. If you know you have 70 feet to work with, you work within that 70 feet, or if you got 60 feet or 40 feet. Because if you come in and say, well, 4 stories or 5 is okay, then my 5 stories are now, 112 feet. And I just think from a staff standpoint, a feet would be easier from where they measure it from and all that and work within it. But yes, in theory, you need a little bit more.
A little bit more.
And you still have to allow within that, you have to allow the design consideration for the architect or the building owner, right? For their purpose, those ceiling heights are critical, right? A hotel or, other purpose building is gonna wanna have at least 11 or 12-foot ceiling. Right, and so you look at that within the allowance, like Chris said.
And the other thing is from the standpoint on Main Street, which is what we're talking about right now. Even if you allow any amount to go up other than what it is, getting back to the economics of it, the existing front building would have to get reworked anyway. Because from a building code standpoint, you cannot build a building up this high and have another roof this low without doing something to this roof to hold up for snow load, wind load, and all that kind of stuff. Drift conditions, they call it. So economics, once again, kind of drives how high this goes, because that means how much they have to beef up that lower building, wall structure and stuff.
I'm not even sure that's. Maybe.
Like I said, that's in.
Might be out
but-
of my league. I don't have my engineering span.
That's what, like Chicago has done, they built up, there is no more land for sure. But in Hendersonville, I think this is a desirable place, like, you don't need to squeeze every little cent out of your property, even though that's exactly what's happening right now, and like why they're all empty. But like, people want to come here, and they want to come here because of the way it is, and risking changing that for economic reasons, like, I don't think it's really worth it for the city, rather than just maybe that one person, but.
Like that, this half and half concept, I think Chris just touched on the negative, right, for the whole process, because without spending a lot of money on a renovation of the entire building, that back half is not gonna get built on top of an existing building.
It would be a
Right,
rebuild.
you could have a complete rebuild with a, historical front. But you're not gonna support the weight structurally in that old, 100-year-old building. So it has to be essentially completely rebuilt. And that will skew the economics toward a brand new building, rather than trying to shoehorn 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag.
Well, I'm in favor of the 40 frontage on Main Street with one story going up after that. I agree with you. I think you can step it up to the 64 after the alley. That would be my
Because I'm saying the one-story ad is still problematic. That's not an easy thing to do unless it's
But don't they deal with the city for all of that as far as code and safety and?
Well, it's engineering.
And it
It has to pass, the engineer's stamp for that building to say, yes, I staked my career with this stamp on the fact that this building is gonna collapse under the added weight. So
Is everybody pretty much good with stepping back with +1 in the back? We just need to kind of decide what is that +1? Is that +1 20 feet?
Good. So if you guys say +1, I think we've heard the other pieces. We can figure out. the number.
Okay.
We don't necessarily need to get in.
It sounds to me like we could have a consensus on the +1.
Yeah, I don't know.
On those properties that you're talking about in that relatively small area. And then, I think the major concern would probably be new construction within the historic district facing Main Street. So I think that would be like, like the bank, or if a building was to burn down, there's brand new construction, and like, what is that gonna look like? Is that gonna effectively change like the character of that whole district? But I think if we have a consensus on the +1, you'll work it out on the overall height requirement, or the overall height maximum. But aesthetically speaking, which was your initial point, I think there's a consensus here that, yeah, we like that idea of another floor. There's a nice little step up. It's a natural step up, not a kind of step up, which may or may not even happen, to your point, from a financial standpoint. But as far as developers, if they're looking at squeezing money out of a property and doing more residential units, I mean, I don't know, are they looking at Main Street necessarily? I mean, I'm sure there's other parcels in the city limits that they could do get many more units out of, other than a Main Street and whatever else.
So I have one question for the 40-foot front, how deep does that?
It's a halfway.
Oh, halfway of the property, okay, good, that's specific.
So-
Because I'd hate to see someone put a false.
Yeah,
front,
it
if
is
you will.
halfway.
So I want to address a couple of things. One, these design standards do talk about building design. So that's a component of the design standards. Also, the historic district, you're required to get a certificate of appropriateness through the Historic Preservation Commission. And there are design standards that govern that, reflecting the character of the district in any kind of new construction. Now, it doesn't say to mimic or be overly trying to portray a historic building. And that's intended to avoid kind of a Disneyland type of feel. We have more of a fake type of feel of it. But the massing, the scale, the materials, the architectural detailing should conform.
Right.
Character. So some of that's covered already. It'll be further covered with the adoption of these standards. And then there was some questions about, so there's a recommendation here, only permit first floor residential uses on side streets and not on Main Street. And so that had come up as well, but beyond that, once you get off of Main Street, this is saying resident, and I think that was from feedback from this group, that there was some appetite for it off of Main. And there's.
We had a discussion at one time, I think it was in relation to a property on Seventh Avenue about allowing an entrance on Main Street or Seventh Avenue to apartments above. So it'd be like an entrance to a staircase or an elevator.
Yes.
So is that in or out, I guess?
Is that in this?
Would that be allowed?
Yes, there now.
Well, that could certainly be a component of any design standards that are adopted for that area. You know, we tackled that in detail, a year and a half ago or so, to really try to retain that commercial feel, but you could have an access door to upper stories.
Which
You wouldn't be able to have front-facing residential the way that we had described it, similar to what this is saying.
I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the consensus initially on the first floor residential was not one block of Main on the avenues. That's what I kind of recall, that we talked about saying, you know, within one block on the avenues, no first floor residential, and then past that. But we do have already examples of first floor residential on the avenues, one block off the Main.
So there's,
Yeah.
Because basically, I mean, the way the grid is set up is that those avenues, especially that first block, it's paid parking, that's central business district still. So I thought we had talked about not doing residential.
This is what it says now. So if you want to discuss that and recommend that it be, that entire 100 block, retained commercial.
Does that open up to lawsuits from existing, I mean,
So-
one or
so
two
there's-
residential?
Hold on a second. That's a level of detail that I don't know that you need to figure out for this plan. You're saying the overall is, hey, we really want to look at not having residential facing Main. And there's some other details about how that will play out. Because you may want to say, you know, for a larger building, we don't want residential on the Main Street, but if there's an apartment in the back of this 10,000 square foot building, we don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
We don't have a problem with apartments on the avenues. All of that, I think, or we do. All of that would be in sort of the standards themselves. To answer your.
You sounded like you just said second floors on Main Street would not be residential, which they already are.
So.
he didn't say so.
Didn't say that.
Oh, I misunderstood.
I think all I'm making the point of is that the overall recommendation is no residential.
First floor.
That's what you're wanting.
Oh, the first
Yeah,
floor.
on the street base. Frontage of the first.
But the idea of that between King and Church on the alley.
I'm saying, I don't think you have to worry about that.
Oh,
The comp plan recommendation is, hey, we're adopting these design standards. We're saying, as we move forward, we want to look at only permitting first floor residential off of Main Street.
That at least introduces the topic, because right now, there is no prohibition of first floor residential. So this introduces that, and as we go towards adoption, that
well, this is saying.
door is open.
Only permit first floor on the side streets and not on Main Street. So basically what we've been saying on. It's just-
Yes, but that's not the way it is now. You can have first floor, right? There is no prohibition on Main Street, residential first floor. Great discussion. I think Lou makes a really valid point, that we can, when we get to the adoption of design standards, we can iron out those details. Does it go all the way to King and Church, or does it stay just on Main Street?
Going back to pushing this forward, I think that there's two things here. If we can get a consensus about what we're talking about, this aesthetically from having a single story, are you comfortable with that? I mean, that's.
So I am here as, facilitate. I don't, my personal opinions, I'm good. There's nothing, if there was something that I really, as a professional planner, heard that, I felt was, contrary to the overall, health of the city, I'd let you know. But the rest of it is you guys in your business.
Do we have a consensus?
And let
Do you wanna
me
go around?
clarify one thing, in the prioritization of what would happen first. I mean, it's 20 years worth of stuff. And they have gone through and prioritized like first, second, third year, or top, 20 items or 40 items or something like 38 or something. This was high up on their list. The codifying design elements was as well, but like that came up in economic vitality as one of our top priorities as well. So like if we want to work on that and go for that, because that's going to be a lot of talk. I feel like it'll take a while. Matt's ambitious and I think oddly Lou's even more ambitious. That this could happen more quickly.
I know Lou.
What did you say?
I said, I know Lou, that's why I'm less ambitious than.
So like that would be like all of these things that are, I mean, I think we need to get building height, like at least suggested, but like there's a lot of detail about signage and there's a lot of detail about, recessed doorways, roofs, entryways, windows, like details, like that would be a priority to work on. What in here is a guideline, but not what will happen for sure. So just to
Agree.
clarify that, like,
And we just want to have this group say, in general, these are the things that we feel strongly about that should either we recommend or suggest for changes. So then that way, whenever we're all looking deeper into it, we've got the recommendations for.
and building height is always a really important topic. So
So I think your point about the committee work taking place, I think that's a really good one. The adoption of the design standards is not in our short-term implementation projects right now. So that could be another recommendation, is that that gets bumped up as a priority and gets added to the short-term list. Because I think that could start at the committee level, you guys diving into this and be like, hey, here's how we would like this to take shape. One other idea, depending on the appetite for it from city council and community development staff, is if the timeline for the, so one of the recommendations is for us to rewrite our zoning code and adopt what's called a unified development ordinance. That's that whole ambitious thing where I think that's going to take a number of years to accomplish. The implementation project as it's written now calls for these design standards to be included in that rewrite of the zoning code. If we're feeling a lot of development pressure on Main Street that could have very long-lasting aesthetic impacts, whether it's the Yakusta Trail opening up and additional development on the south end of Main Street, whatever it may be, that may drive that. You may want to, try to say, well, we should get these design standards in place ahead of an entire rewrite of the zoning ordinance. So maybe they plug into our current C1 zoning district as a placeholder until a full rewrite is done. And I'll also say we have dealt with this a lot, and this is kind of what we're getting at right now is sometimes it's better just to get something on the books. And it's not perfect. It's hard to get perfect because there's so many different opinions, and it is consensus building and compromising, but you get something on the books that's better than what you had. And then over time, you can continue to tweak it and improve it. And so that could also be a strategy to kind of get something in place that's going to help protect downtown and promote it. So
I'd like to make a motion.
okay.
do it.
Multifaceted, so bear with me, but I move that we agree to recommend 40-foot front elevation on Main Street for the first half of the block. Back half to be +1 to be determined and worked out by engineering in the city. The outside of that remains for the present at 64 feet. But that the city, planning, engineering, all the parties responsible agreed to work to modernize that height to coincide and better meet developers, architects' requirements for newer buildings.
That seems like a really detailed motion. I mean, I'm not sure that's our responsibility more so than we want to keep Main Street
We're here.
pretty one story. And you put in there that we agreed to all of these things. I think by motion, when we vote, we'll agree or disagree to all that, but the specifics are, I think you probably might want to make it a little more general than real specific, because we're just an advisory board that we want city, I guess, unless you want city to know this is specifically what our advice is that?
I think it's okay. I think
I think it's fine too.
so at the beginning of the motion, you know, I would, as staff would appreciate adding that the board recommends approval of chapter 5
But we can do that too,
with the
whatever.
following revisions, that the height limit be as described, and that there's, you know, work towards revisiting the 64-foot height limit outside of that area.
Are there other things though, before we recommend? In
Friendly amendments.
And I think even adding on to that should be the idea that
the
like,
longest.
this is an idea that we would like to prioritize as well, you know, like.
Yes, go into the prioritization list.
Do we want to recommend raising the 64-foot limit?
The state said it. You know,
Our recommendation doesn't have any bearing on what, like,
It's
it's just a recommendation.
Yeah, and this document is not gonna be adopted. Now, if we adopted it in our zoning ordinance and said that our height limit on Main Street was 70 feet, would we all get arrested? It would get thrown out like we would.
So I'm gonna say I'd have to consult with you. I mean, I think as a recommendation that the board wants to investigate the height limit and raising it from 64, that you're certainly able to make that recommendation.
But like Matt said, put something on the books that's better than what's on the books now. And then,
So,
you know,
and understanding like how this will be presented, we will bring this as a recommendation from the board to council as a part of their public hearing tomorrow. Then, as we all know, council makes a final decision. Council will say, yes, we're interested in that, or no, we're not, or, you know,
and we have a council member who is well versed and will remember all the information that will be sitting in the room tomorrow.
I do have a question. Try to be here, keep my mouth shut.
Back, Chris, what you said, are we talking about amending the height somewhat to a maximum of 70? Would that incorporate what you're talking about, or?
No, I was using that as an example. My opinion would be a much larger height.
Yeah, I mean,
We're two different things, the Main Street and the +1 in the historic district. That's staying at the 40-foot at the street and adding a floor, whatever, after you get back. Beyond that, within that 64-foot restriction, that's the part that I'm saying, raise it on up.
you're just saying let it go.
And my question at the very beginning was why, you just so that we have limited property, that you want that to be
Yes,
unlimited height?
It's just about dollars and cents.
Yeah.
It's just about maximizing the use of square footage that you're gonna have. I don't know how that's gonna go over, but I would prefer you kind of encapsulate the Main Street piece of what you want, and then go to a whole different thing on the other side where you're talking about if you want to change that at all.
Different bullet point.
Yes, sir.
Yes, got it.
Yeah, so
And if you want to get into 64 and where you're going out some of the main corridors out, if you want to address that, do it differently. Don't throw us one pile of poop in a bag.
It should be,
Kind of separate it.
Yeah.
so maybe it should be two different motions, like one is just, maybe the first motion is just what you said, 40-foot plus the 1-story, determine whatever you guys decide, that's one motion that we agree on. Then the second one, it would, I guess, be a motion of revisiting or investigating the idea of the 64 feet higher or lower outside of, outside the other side of the alleyways.
that's a whole.
So maybe if you separate it on two separate motions, that'll be easier, especially for council to understand what it is.
But would you keep that on east side of the downtown historic?
That's a different discussion. I have my own.
Versus west side?
Anyway, let's deal with the first motion first. Let's get the first motion out of the way.
First motion, which is limited to the front facing properties on Main Street within the district. Like Phil said, it's at 40 in the front, and it's a +1, and also putting there from an aesthetic standpoint, this is a +1. City with the design guidelines and the zoning and engineering is gonna determine what that looks like, so that's gonna work itself out. So it's really what we're saying is from a aesthetic standpoint, we have a step up of 1 floor. It could be a nice, big, tall loft space, but aesthetically speaking, it's a natural, it's just a plateau up. And that's aesthetically speaking, we think that will not take away from the character of the front facing properties. I think that should be motion number 1. We have a consensus. then-
So what I think we can do is if we list out bullet point our recommendations, not in a motion, we can recommend our approval. What is it? What is?
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval with these as our recommendations. And then they can just be like with the set of recommendations is coming with it, but they don't have to be like part of the motion. The recommendations, the notation of that is part of the.
A suggestion would be that you take these bullet points and you just do a show of hands and get an informal consensus, make sure.
That's fine with me.
And then you bring it into a single
Single
motion
motion.
with different bullet points. And then
Yes.
it'll be staff's responsibility to clarify, present that cleanly to city council.
So right now I have 40 feet frontage on Main Street for the the front half of the block, which is the 50 feet of the 100 feet blocks going back towards the alleys. And then allow a single story step up.
Hey, Wag, let me ask one question.
Yeah.
On the first floor of Carolina, sorry.
I'm gonna call her Wag now. There you go.
I didn't hear that. The 100 feet on the first floor. Lou, can the back half, the back 50 feet on the first floor be residential or 25 of it or what? Or does the entire first floor have to be commercial or retail? I'd like to kind of know that too.
I think dealing in the Main Street district,
Historic district. That's what it said.
we would want it to be, in this case, we'd want it to be not residential in this district.
Say that.
That's the.
I just want to make sure that.
Yes, no?
Not just Main Street facing, it's the entire first floor of that building.
Coming in from the back, that is now the entrance to residential. If it is, or if you have the front entrance, however you do it. Elevator's gonna have to be on the back or whatever. This didn't know.
Well, it's not the entrance, it's the actual residence
Units.
units, because you own,
If you have it in the back, if people are using the back.
You-
To the residential.
You're saying like, for example, like Jane Asher building is huge. So like the back, so it's what, 10,000 square feet. So the back, 5,000 square feet as residential on street level is what you're saying that, or asking.
I'm asking,
Yeah.
do you want it all to be residential on the ground floor? That even has like a day basement part of it. It isn't even on Main Street, it goes below that.
I would go back to what Lou said earlier, that level of detail would be in the adopted ordinance when we bring it to. So we can wrestle with that level of detail.
It's currently, most everything is entirely commercial on the first floor, which makes sense only because,
Historically.
I think it should be.
well, currently, yeah.
well, this would be like from the alley forward, probably, yes, but on the side street,
Well, it pertains.
like, then you could get, I mean, but we're not supposed to get into detail.
We're talking Main Street right now.
They don't
So
know.
personally, I say just marginal, front and back, first.
I mean, that's kind of where I lean too.
I mean, it's one.
I know Matt has
That's just one.
10 minutes before he has to leave.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that is a level of detail that will take a little bit of work to figure out. Because I think there could be a market argument for some of our larger spaces splitting. That's right. Their square footages. So you don't have department stores downtown anymore, but we have department store buildings. And so my point where I'm going is there are a couple of different things that we would want to consider in detail there. I don't think that bullet point that's in the plan now eliminates the possibility of that discussion. So you can explore that further when you're working out the very detailed nature of what we're going to permit in terms of residential and what we're not.
And you both were there for the discussion. It started from, the catalyst was that property on Seventh that wanted a text amendment. And that was a couple sessions of very long discussion, debate on.
So I know that'll take some time, and I don't think, like, as soon as, it's like pulling the string out of the sweater, as soon as we start pulling on that, trying to describe it in any different way than it's described there, we're going to be adding paragraph upon paragraph, and we don't need
Are you saying I'm stringing all this?
In no way am I saying that.
Caroline,
I'm saying that I think that's
I have
a
a
part we can figure out.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Matt has to leave in 8 minutes.
So we need to,
So right now we need to what?
well, I was gonna say clarify the motion.
Yes, so our recommendations are 40 feet height on the front facing Main or facing the
Facing Main Street.
Main Street. Half of that block back, which is about 50 feet. You can go up a story. You guys will work out the details on the height
In the historic district.
in the historic district. And then outside of that, the 64 feet, as it is on this diagram, in the pink and yellow diagram. But we like the step up thing. That's really the only change to what was up here.
So, so like a show of hands or nods or something to that effect.
About all in favor?
And then also we had with the to continue considering modernizing height requirements to meet the needs of architects and return on investment. Which should be just a recommendation anyway. I think we always do that. So those are like the recommendations.
A question on that.
Yes.
Because that one, the modernizing height requirements would be a big one. And so should we say specifically, modernize or considering modernizing the 64-foot height requirement?
I would like to have them separate personally. I think.
These are two separate.
One motion.
Can you get a consensus on the first bullet?
Okay, 40 feet frontage,
Everybody's got it. I think
40
everybody's.
feet
Yeah,
frontage,
feet plus the one.
consensus.
The exception for Main Street, we'll call it that. The exception for front facing.
I think, yes, raise your hand if you agree with
Yeah,
it.
raise your hand.
Yes,
Okay,
Great.
let's go.
good.
Modernizing the 64-foot height limit.
Or just studying how to address it.
What do you mean by modern?
Just being cute.
I know.
Yeah,
But I think if you say you're modernizing it, kind of throws a
Positive spin on this.
revisit. Yeah. just-
Revisit.
Just revisit.
Revisit.
What's that?
So I've got written up, revisiting the 64-foot height requirements. That's all I got.
Period.
and then a consensus on the,
Any other-
Vote on that one.
Limitation, not
You didn't have the one story.
Height limit.
We've
No,
already
we
done
got
that.
that one.
Yes.
what we're doing now is just doing a consensus on the bullet points, and then we'll do a motion to recommend those bullet points.
Okay.
Are we on the continue to consider the modernization of height requirements?
Revisit the height.
64-foot height limit
Yes,
limitation.
we're on that one. Let's see, show of hands. Who wants to do that?
Okay, no, and then no's.
All right, so
So, okay, so we have some who said no on that. So please raise your hand if you're no on that. Okay.
We want to keep it at 64?
I don't want.
Gary and Aaron.
I think it should go lower. I think we should extend the Main Street district, keep it lower, further out.
Which is, okay, so 64 in the pink, but then it'd be 40, like down Seventh, and okay.
That'd be dope.
Oh, that's what we're recommending right now, is leaving it like that, basically.
I think you have.
This is me personally.
Yeah, it doesn't
we
matter.
have a majority.
There were
I will say-
that wanted it lower, but.
Well,
The 40 actually lowers, would actually be a reduction to our current zoning in some places, so.
So let's, okay,
Revisiting 64.
revisiting the 64,
There's a majority.
there was a majority, but 2 said no, that's important if they ask.
3 said no. I've got it, I'll have it.
Okay,
That's why she asked.
plus 1 story halfway back, Yes,
We did that.
we're gonna, okay, I did not see a show of hands on that.
Oh, yeah, we all.
Y'all did it. Even you did.
And our recommendation is that we prioritize these items.
Prioritize.
Yes, prioritization, the design elements and of the height.
Prioritizing adoption of the
Codification.
design standards.
That's right.
Yes, that's. Anybody know, get the consensus on that? Do we wanna? Do the 40-foot, because that's a reduction of what's currently on the books,
What's the question?
the yellow.
Oh, okay, so we have not had any discussion on that at this point, so that's. So,
You
yeah, that's,
going to 64 and then.
No, going to 40 in the yellow.
it is 40.
Oh, it is 40?
It is currently 40.
I thought you just said it, that's a reduction.
We have zoning districts that currently allow you to build higher than 40 in those areas.
Seven them.
Yes.
And the
See,
other
the
down.
CMU,
So.
zoning, so
yeah,
primarily along 64 between, near the police station.
South.
Do you want it to lead, all roads lead to Main Street, downtown, to downtown?
Seven them.
Sorry.
Seven them.
But if you left it, you're revisiting the 64 would cover everything
Well,
outside of the historic downtown district, which you already got 40 foot in a story.
but not
That's why I
necessarily.
voted no, it was too
Well,
late.
yeah, but not necessarily, because if it's recommending the plan with these adjustments.
Sorry.
That 40 feet was not anything that we've talked about here, because what we talked about here is reviewing the 64-foot requirement, but we haven't talked about any type of reviewing of that 40-foot requirement in that yellow section. So that if there's a discussion of the height in that 40-foot section, that has not been reflected in what I have, I think.
The 40 foot section being outside the downtown 40.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, right,
Yellow.
yes. Yellow there.
Yeah, but it could be in our MSD one day. But that's not really in our, it isn't, it isn't.
Right now.
No, it's not. You're right.
A plan later
Right.
on down the road.
Yeah, you're right. Good. Thank you, Chris.
So I'll say overall, the future land use map talks about, really trying to direct growth into specific activity centers, intensity nodes, whatever you want to call them, primarily along the interstate 64 Upward Road, these key points where we would like to direct growth and intensify growth. In between those nodes, it lowers down in intensity, and that's partly so you're not just in a canyon of development with a ton of curb cuts and just complete congestion. You want to create walkable, bikeable nodes where people can get a lot done within those nodes, and then when they need to travel out of that, they can. This is really about creating that intense node here. And then as you travel out of Main Street, out of the downtown core, you're traveling out,
Step down.
and then you come back into another node. You go out.
So, right, okay, so we have the motion to recommend chapter 5 with the with the points of consensus. Is this, yes?
You want to read it back? Maybe she should.
Really?
Well, not you, her, because she's got it recorded for the city.
She's got it written down.
I know, but
Okay, Jamie, do you want to read it back?
So I've got, the downtown board recommends 40-foot elevation facing Main Street, back half to be plus 1 foot to be worked out. And, outside remain 64 feet outside of alleys. Number 2, revisiting the 64-foot height requirement. Number 3, adoption of design standards.
As a priority,
It's not a height.
Prioritize adoption of design standards.
Limitation.
height limitation.
Okay, whenever I read it before, it was height requirement, so we want to change that to height limitations? Is that what
it's
we're
revisiting 64-foot height limitation.
limitations? Okay. Are there any other items? So the motion would be that the Downtown Advisory Board moves to recommend the following, and I'll include in the following where there was dissent
And this is
Yeah.
exactly your motion, basically, just.
You don't have to.
Okay.
But then that way they're aware that there's, yeah, and and then, well, sorry, recommend that chapter with those following points and.
Can I say just one thing about revisiting the 64? May I, it's still discussion. The only reason I mainly raise my hand is it's real vague. Like, does that mean every place where we have revisiting 64, we're gonna start having?
I think it's purposely vague because it's just revisiting it and look for.
And that will work for council.
That will.
Sure, and that will work for staff. We know, everybody that's gonna be a part of it knows what it is right now. It's impossible to make the city approved for all of us. I mean, it's just, we're gonna have to come back and ask questions, but I sure did adjust that, they that as well as staff. It's good.
What I like about it is it leaves it open to maybe we bring it back down.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't make it taller, maybe we talk about bringing it down.
It's
And
definitely,
the
the way it
reason
seems
I-
right now, it says recommend extending the 64, like that point gets lost, the way that that's written. You know?
All parts.
That makes it sound like we want to recommend.
Everything in the yellow, and it could be all these very high.
Well, that would be the recommendation with the clarification of this, and he came into the conversation saying, we understand this is unclear. This is what we harped on last time, and this is also one of the things that planning board brought up,
Well,
like the graphs and diagrams. So, yes,
it's reassuring that we have a city council person here, as he said, he could carry back.
Yes.
our points.
okay,
Spring on the sweater here.
so this is the motion, so we know what the motion is.
Keep your.
Bill made it. It is exactly your motion, so, isn't it? Okay, all right.
Okay.
John Ryan seconded. Is there any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. I am, or is there any opposed? It's okay to be opposed, no? Okay. There we go.
Congratulations, right?
Lord.
That was an important conversation.
It was. Bill, that's just the beginning.
Thanks, Wade, you got us there.
Whack. You wanna-
Only certain people are allowed to call me that. Chris, you're one of them. All right, now, organizational meeting. So what we need to do here is, we already did introductions and welcome. We need to elect a chair and vice chair. We need to, yes,
Whatever we're about to go over, do we need to vote on this? Because I'm supposed to be in a meeting like 10 minutes ago. Somewhere else. Is there something that has to be voted on this or is it just going over what's,
I think you're,
Enough people.
have enough people.
okay.
Yeah, as long as you still have
Voted on this.
in the room, even if you leave, we're good.
Sorry.
And Jerry's gonna be elected chair.
Yeah. Quit.
That's every day.
You know, according to the bylaws, there's supposed to be a nominating committee that would present a
Is
ballot.
there?
I just happened to read them, but I don't think we really have that concern.
I think that the board can be considered the nominating committee.
Just name more than-
Okay, so we read that the other day, though. That's. We did read this the other day, but we took it to mean for the subcommittees. I can't remember. Jamie and I did read over this.
So in Main Street, we've got 4 subcommittees, which is like a requirement for Main Street, and we've got design, economic vitality, promotion, and organization. We don't have an organization subcommittee because we have the board, which is the organization subcommittee. So the board handles any organizational thing. So that's what I would consider is the board as the nominating committee.
I mean,
Why don't you pull the bylaws up, Jamie?
Caroline, it might be a moot point.
Probably not. Let's
Well,
look at it.
no, I don't do
I
that.
want to look at it.
Well, it was sent out, that's why I mentioned it. I don't think. But we have to vote on it today.
We don't have to.
Well, according to the bylaws. Or sometime in July.
It just says the board shall elect the chair and vice chair as its first order of business. Which we should have done at the beginning of this. Second order of business stuff, you know, sort of meetings. I thought it was for the meetings.
Election of chair and vice chair.
For the.
I did not mean to cause a problem, sorry. I just got angry.
I don't see anywhere it says nominating committee in
Can you
here.
just tell us where you saw it?
Yeah, do you know where you saw it?
Yeah, that's right. But if you don't see it now, let's on.
It says officers, presiding officer, the presiding officer of each meeting of the board shall be chair of the board in situations with. That's like chair, vice chair stuff. Selection of the chair and vice chair. The chair shall be selected by majority vote of the board unless city council indicates to the board that that city council will appoint said chair, in which case the appointment shall be made by the city council. The vice chair shall be elected by majority vote of the board. Powers and duties. Let's see.
Nothing else. That's the only reference.
And it doesn't say anything about a nominating committee. I think
Yes, I'm glad it's not in there.
I mean, the only thing I think
Under
that,
appointments,
Is
so
it-
that's, yeah. The board shall use the following procedures to make appointments for board officers. The team of the board, shall report on nominations received and reviewed to make its appointments recommendations by year. The chair shall then open for nominations.
you know, this needs to be fixed, period, because this is like completely crazy like that. Shall report on nominations. Appointment recommendations. It doesn't say anything about a nominating committee.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we're fine.
Go ahead.
So it says the organization team of the board shall report on nominations received and reviewed and make its appointment recommendations, if any. The chair should then open the floor for nominations whereupon the names of other possible appointees may be put forward by the board members. We don't have an organization team. I don't even know why that's in there. She must have pulled that from some other, when I say she, I mean Angie Beaker. Must have pulled that from some other thing. That needs to be fixed. So I will say one thing that is going to happen with every board for the city is for the next year, one board a month will be gone over the fine tooth comb for bylaws, procedure, everything, because there's still messy things that everyone is trying to clean up. We've all been chasing it. We haven't been able to get it all complete. And so staff, not Jamie, other internal staff is gonna fine tooth comb everything, including like the verbiage on things that go in front of council, because some of that is still just like incorrect from, it still says Main Street. It says Main Street instead of downtown. Like, and it doesn't reference Seventh, which we think is not cool. And that's like we've been working on that for like 12 years. So we're gonna get that fixed.
Do we want to do selection of chair and vice chair?
So how does that work?
So opens the floor up for nominations.
Okay, we're looking at community character team members first.
We are gonna look at that. We are,
Nominating the chair and the vice chair first.
but then we are gonna look at the team members. And they are going to elect their own chairs and vice chairs, which we believe the bylaws allow them to do and allow them to operate like that. And then also our calendar for the year.
Okay, Carolyn, Matthew, Patsy, Linda, Michelle, Aaron, Nancy, Christian, and Bill. Who of those do you,
For community character?
yeah,
Wait, are we doing?
Wait.
Chair and vice chair of the.
Someone want to make a motion to nominate a chair.
Of Downtown Advisory Board, not community character. We'll get to that in a minute.
oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, open for discussion, I mean.
I had-
No, I'm just asking, it's for discussion, I guessing that the current ones are considering redoing it again,
We did this already.
but do they want to redo it again, that's the
I
question.
nominate Caroline and Matt.
Second.
I'd second or third.
Aaron made a motion.
Okay.
Chris seconded. Nancy
Okay.
thirded.
Couldn't do it.
Well, no, I thought we did this 2 meetings or 3 meetings ago when they agreed.
We didn't do it officially.
Oh, okay.
We just talked about, like, maybe we weren't gonna get reappointed and who would be chair then? And
Check that box.
no, it's.
All right, so
Okay, Chris seconded.
So this, we established that for downtown advisory board, so now in the upcoming community character and vitality, well, all of them, they're going to elect.
They're going to elect their own.
vote on this, don't
Well, yeah, we do. And we need, are there any more nominations though?
So we have a motion for Carolina's chair, Matthew's vice chair. We have a second.
We have a second.
You have a second, third, and
All right.
fourth.
Okay. Can we?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you guys.
You don't even pay attention to me. What's the point?
They see you too. Well, that was a couple, yeah, we were until no one said a word about for multiple meetings in a row that they would step up and do chair and vice chair. And so then we said we'd stay.
We love it.
Okay, so next, for the next three, I have our subcommittees. And so because we have people on the subcommittees who are not also on the board, we just need the board to approve the members of the subcommittees, and it can be just approving what we have listed here, if that's helpful.
There's
Or any other.
actually someone missing on community character, Diane Dean.
What?
She's interested in being on it as a volunteer. It's open to anybody who's,
Oh, no, I hadn't heard that.
Would you like to appoint,
Any discussion?
would you like to add Diane to the list?
I would like to add Diane Dean.
Excellent.
Community character team. And she would like to participate in that.
So we need a motion on that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I make a motion to approve
And
approve the subcommittee team members as listed with the addition of Andy to community character.
Second.
Matt, you made the motion, Aaron seconded. Any other people that we'd like to add?
Do we need, our new board members on any of those?
later on.
Not yet, we can appoint more later.
Is
I
that?
think maybe you guys want to get your feet wet on. All right,
You even understand what they all are yet, so I think. Yeah.
is there any discussion on that? For now? All right, all those in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? And we have talked about recruitment for that, for both of them, and we can continue revisiting that. We can appoint people at any time. We just need to reappoint them every year. Because it's part of the organizational meeting. All right, economic vitality, so that is. Chris, you want to read them off? You had them good earlier.
Carol, John, Daniel, Nancy, Phil, Jerry, and Aaron.
Anybody else know of anyone else who wants to be on this or who should be on this? And again, we're in the beginning of talking about a recruitment piece for both of these.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask, as board members, if we can make any of those meetings, we are allowed to attend.
Absolutely, and every one of these meetings is a public meeting open to the public. Anybody from the public can attend.
We
Yes.
have to attend.
At least-
We recommend, it's strongly recommended that you
Participate.
participate in at least one additional subcommittee or activity, like Joe, for example, is our representative for TDA. And we're hoping to get a representative for Apple Festival. We're hoping, I know, we're hoping. We're hoping we can go ahead and finish that off. We'll talk about it next time. Yeah, because he's already on that, because Mass already has representation, so that would like tick 2 marks off, basically, with that, would be great. Anybody else that's not listed on this subcommittee that we want to add? All right. Will someone make a motion to approve the Economic Vitality Committee members as presented?
I think the motion I just made.
With community
was for
character.
Committees.
Oh, I thought I said all subcommittees, but
Oh,
as presented.
I took it as that too, but I wasn't sure.
Oh, you did? I thought it was
I said all
character.
subcommittees
But I wasn't sure.
to approve their members as presented here, with the addition of
Diane Dean.
Diane Dean.
There we go.
That was the motion that I made. So we've already approved the.
All of
board
them. So that's how you took it too?
That's how I took it, but then I was just gonna kind of roll with it.
Anybody else say it like that? Everybody took it like that, just not me?
I'm good.
I'm good with that. I do.
Let's do economic vitality.
I submitted to approve the economic vitality board as presented.
A second.
All right, Sam, Aaron and Sam. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
I just have
Okay.
one more question.
Yeah.
For, since the last one, former president chairs participate in a lot of these meetings. Do they need to officially be, like Michelle, for instance? Do they need to officially be added to these committees?
We have to add, yes, because they're technically not a
Voting, well,
board member.
but I mean, they're, the committees, not the advisory board.
Yes, so that's what we're doing. We're voting now to add them as to appoint them as subcommittee members.
So if you want somebody, because I know she attends things, it just dawned on me.
Yeah, she's on here for events team.
Oh, she is? I must.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
and community character.
Community character.
Okay, sorry.
So, yeah, we've already just appointed her.
All right, let's do the same thing for events team. Can someone make a motion?
I make a
for that?
motion to approve the board members as presented for events team.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good. That one's good. Take a quick look at the calendar, please.
And this is no different from the one that we approved in December. The one too many years.
I make a motion to approve the calendar as
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good. That's it. Informal discussion.
None, I gotta go.
Come on.
These meetings are getting longer.
Somebody needs a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, Matthew Hickman.
Thank you.
This was an important one, though.
I know.
City council.
4 hours.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate everyone's input. The conversation, especially on the hike, was really